Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School Podcast. I'm your host Chris Pope, and as always we are brought to you by Cots Bros Lures, the most trusted baits in trapping. If you like a homegrown company, if you like supporting guys that are living their passion, living their dream, from humble beginnings, so to speak, that is why you should support Cots Bros Lures. These guys started over 20 years ago in their kitchen table, their mother's kitchen table, as teenagers, trying to figure out how to pursue their dream of making trapping a part of their life. And they've done it, and it's just a great story. They got great products, great people to deal with. So support, buy your supplies. This year with so many conventions not happening, you're gonna have to go online to order stuff, and they're gonna get it shipped out. You put an order in, they're gonna get it shipped out. A lot of times the same day if they can. So fast shipping. Sometimes they'll throw you in a little goodie. I'm not promising you that, but every once in a while. So I really like doing business with those guys. They're down to earth, and they support what we're doing, right? So speaking of stories, that's kind of where I was going to go with today's podcast. It's going to be a little bit different. Let me make sure my phone's turned off here. But with today's podcast, I was just thinking about looking back through kind of old episodes and some of the things that I like, and something different. And I got, the last episode, I mentioned, if you've got some stories, if you've got some, I guess, times when you get in a tide or something like that, when you've had some kind of dramatic situation on the trap line, get in touch with me and let me know, because that's part of the fun of reading the magazine articles and things that we enjoy doing, is that element of unknown, that element of adventure that's built in. And I think that's one of the reasons that we do what we do, why we're drawn to it, is because, that pioneer, that mountain man spirit of not knowing what's out there, not knowing what's to come, and overcoming those obstacles. And I think people, y'all weigh in, let me know, I think people would really enjoy that, hearing those stories. And so for starters, to kind of get that ball rolling, I thought I would roll out some stories a little bit different. I'm going to talk about some alligator hunting stories. So this is I don't know where I'm going with that. The summertime, and so I was thinking, something a little different. I've got trapping rolling around in my mind, I promise you, but just thinking about something different, and so I thought I'd weigh in. I did for one summer, I interned with a gentleman, wound up being one of my best lifelong friends. And I was beaver trapping and alligator hunting. He's the one that got me started into trapping, and his trapping style is a lot of what I've, everything I do today pretty much is based on his trapping style, and getting that exposure and experience, and it led me to doing alligator trapping and hunting on my own at one point. So that's what I was I thought it'd be a little bit something different, but could kind of tell some stories, and truthfully it's a little bit selfish, because one thing I look back, and a lot of these situations like this, man, it would have been ideal to have a video camera, and be taking more pictures and journaling, but as y'all all well know, when you get, especially when you get caught up in the heat of the moment, on the trap line, we always wish we had taken more pictures and whatnot. And so just trying to kind of get these stories down and where they can kind of be preserved, hopefully. And I think it's something that will be enjoyed. So let me know what you think. So, for starters, these first few stories are from my time when I was in South Georgia doing the alligator trapping with my friend. And one of the most memorable was what we called the hockey pond gator. And this was a somewhat of a water treatment pond that was kind of in the back of a trailer park, kind of between a trailer park and the marsh. the tidal saltwater marsh, brackish water marsh. And so we got a call. We went there. We got there during the day. So the way that we generally operated is a lot of times at night. So one, he was working a full-time job. Him and his wife were both working full-time jobs, and so we'd have to wait until they got home and then could go out and do our nuisance work and capturing alligators. And two, the alligators are just frankly a lot of times easier to locate during the night because you can pull up on a pond or a river or whatever, and you can shine a light, and those eyes just pop out and glow. You pull up there during the daytime, and you can look and look, and if that alligator's just got his eyeball and his nose, the tip of his snout sticking up out of the water, you may never see him. So it's really a game of chance and patience if you really wanted to sit there and kind of study with binoculars during the daytime. But at night, you can get a quick beat on those alligators. And then also, they're generally easier to approach. So when you hit them with that spotlight and you start to come up on them, they tend to hold and let you get closer than if you were approaching them during the daytimes. Now some of the nuisance alligators are a nuisance because they're habituated to people, and so they don't spook when people approach them, and so that makes life a little bit easier. So, one of the main ways that we were doing it at that time that we were catching these alligators were we were using a crossbow rigged up like a souped up bow fishing rig is exactly what it is. And so we had a float on and a length of line, probably about 30 feet of line, and then a fishing arrow. The key was, one, with the trajectory and the weight of that arrow, you had to get, within 15 feet was ideal. 20 feet was stretching it. You needed to get close because that arrow drops and loses its velocity quickly. And then also, you're dealing with a really tough-skinned animal, and the part that you're aiming at may be underwater, so you're combating against several things there. But so we were trying to get as close as possible, get a line in them, and whether that was through shooting with the arrow or just putting a snare and a noose over their neck, that was always preferable. If we shot them with the crossbow, we would try to get them up and then put a snare on them with a rope and a float. A float was always key because those alligators, when they kind of sense they're in danger, they'll start to roll. And if you don't have a float, even if you do have a float, if your line's not long enough, they'll roll that rope up. And like I say, even if you got a float, they get that float rolled right up against their body. And you're talking, a couple 100-pound alligator, they can sink, and that float's going with them. It's not floating. So we would try to always get multiple lines on them, preferably a large line. We would just use beaver snares with a heavier rope and then a float tied to the end of it. And you just slip that snare over his neck and snap it tight. And once it snaps tight, you better hold on. And then alligators tend to spoil quickly. And so we would keep them alive until we were able to process them. And, of course, we were catching them at night anyway. So, rolling back in at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, last thing you want to do is turn around and go skinning something, So we were catching them alive. We would get them on shore, tape their mouth, and tape their feet and all, and then haul them back. We had a kind of a holding container that we put them in until we got ready to skin them. But that was kind of the process. And so we also had a big fishing rod and a kind of a throwing treble hook. But for most of the alligators we caught at that time, we were catching them with either snaring, being able to get right up on them, or shooting with a crossbow and pursuing them that way. And all these alligators were nuisance alligators. So they were called in by someone to the state, and then the state issued a permit for the designated alligator trapper to go and remove that alligator, and then you're issued a CITES tag that has to go along with the hides. The alligator trapper was allowed to keep the alligator in compensation for doing the job, so you didn't charge the landowner, the homeowner, whoever, anything. You got to keep the alligator as your compensation. At some point in time, that probably worked out pretty good. The alligator market has not been excuse me, spectacular, and so that's not really great compensation. Um, I had something else I was going to say, and the other thing that one of the things that I found out when I started doing it for myself was that if you're not catching a large volume, it's kind of like fur. Nobody wants to buy 5 raccoons. It's kind of the same thing. If you don't have a large volume, it can be hard to find a buyer as well. Just find somebody that's interested. So, getting back to our the topic at hand, the hockey pond gator. So this was like I say, kind of a pond of questionable cleanliness, maybe a good way to say it. We didn't want to get in it. We didn't want to touch the alligator, right? We had to catch the gator, and he's a good gator, and that's part of the problem is, you get so doing that, you get a lot of calls for an 8-foot alligator, and you get there and it's a 4-foot alligator. People have no concept of how to judge, and so when you do see a 10-foot, kind of in my experience, you top 10 foot and you get pretty interested, you get pretty excited because that's a big gator. And so when you roll up and see a 10-foot alligator, you're all in, ready to go. And so that's where we were. Loaded up. We just had a little John boat and a trolling motor. And the memorable part of the whole experience, because that first day that we went out there, I think we got one shot on the gator and missed. I was driving the boat and my buddy was up front, and we missed that first shot again during the day. And but the memorable part was as we were, I don't think it was when we first put in, but for whatever reason we had gone back to the bank. And like I said, I'm running the trolling motor, and to get up to the bank I had to pop the trolling motor up out of the water. And so when we got whatever we needed, probably get another arrow is probably what we were trying to do. And that's the thing is, man, I wish this stuff was better documented. But that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of relive and jog my memory. But pushed the boat off, and I went to engage the trolling motor, and I didn't put the motor all the way down into the water. And I turned the handle, and of course that prop hit the water and sprayed it everywhere. And I'm sitting here looking at it, so I get it all in the face. I'm talking, disgusting. Like I was immediately, I got a pretty strong stomach. I didn't start vomiting or anything, but I have never spit so much in my life. As soon as we left there, we went to a gas station, and I bought the jug of mouthwash and just used the whole thing cleaning my mouth. I don't even know that anything got in my mouth, but I just felt so disgusting. But that was honestly kind of an anticlimactic story, because the pitiful part about it was we didn't even catch the alligator. We saw him, we knew he was a big alligator. Didn't even catch the alligator. My buddy did wind up catching the alligator after the fact out of the hockey pond. But one kind of additional side note on that, we had a lot of calamities, because that's kind of what happens to me when I do things, is just everything turns into a calamity. And especially, us spending 3 months at night, in the evenings, late, trying to catch dangerous alligators and stuff, and using different equipment. We had a trailer that he had rigged up that we could put the alligators in, and then had a kind of a box on top, and we throw the boat on top. And for whatever reason, one time the boat came loose from the top and flopped off, and it's blanging down the side of the road. It was a tough boat. It was a good boat, just a little old John boat, But that's the kind of stuff that happens to me just consistently. Case in point, we just bought a boat this past weekend, and driving home from buying the boat, 2 blowout tires, not one, but 2. One just wouldn't have been enough. It's like a 2-hour ride, right? The first one was pretty quick. Okay, the second one, we almost got home, and I wound up having to drop the boat on the side of the road, run to the house, and get a spare tire, fortunately, that I had that was a little small and a little borderline dry rotted, but luckily it made it home. but that's the kind of stuff that you should be prepared. If you ever invite me to come do something, or if I ever come do something with you, you should be prepared that the worst case scenario is probably going to happen, and you just be thankful if it doesn't, because I always am. But just kind of a side tangent. But that's the kind of stuff. Another thing that happened is I got the bright idea. So we had this big. It was a big plastic tank, probably 12 feet diameter, and it had no top on it. So that's what we would put the alligators in, right? Get a bunch of alligators in there, kept water in there. And so we got some pretty big alligators in there. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to use my head. We got this tractor here. I'm going to use my head, and I'm going to use the boom on this tractor to pull these big alligators out. And so I think I shot the alligator first, because that's one of the awkward things about alligators is, well, it's like reptiles. When you kill them, their nerves stay active for a long time. So if you kill one and then immediately go to skinning it, then its legs are going to move and its tail's going to twitch, and I mean it's I mean, you can have it, you know, completely skinned, and you start pushing into the legs and that leg will move. I mean, it's crazy, and it's also a pain in the neck to try to skin. So I went ahead and shot the alligator. I had a rope. Before I'd shot it, I put the rope around its neck and kind of tightened it up so that I have something to pull it out with. Went and got the tractor. Man, I don't know what I've been thinking. I'm working smarter, not harder here. Forgot the key ingredient, that the tractor didn't have brakes. So to help unload, there was a little hill, and that's the container was, you know, right at the bottom. I mean, not a hill like a drop off. It's probably 3 feet, and so I was going to back the tractor up right to the edge of that drop off. Boom was going to be perfectly situated over the center of the container, and the alligator out and rocking and rolling. Well, of course, I back up there and hit the brakes, and that's when I remember, oh shoot, we got no brakes in this tractor. And so, boom, I roll right back into the container, break the container all to pieces. And so that was the end of being able to use the container. Case in point, that's the kind of calamities that happen to me whenever I'm doing anything. So, another kind of a calamity that I was super disappointed about. It wound up being kind of neat, but I was super disappointed. So we had an alligator. We had a call at like a retirement community. A big alligator, like a 9-foot alligator, in one of the ponds there. And so we show up. It wasn't quite all the way dark. It was like dusk, but it was still, you know, had a headlight, and we just had rigged up a little sneak boat, just a one-man little sneak boat. And my buddy had rigged it up with a trolling motor, foot pedals to control. I mean, it sounds snazzy. It was like redneck all the way, but it was just a little one-man boat, and it was like, man, this is gonna be perfect for alligator hunting. You know, a lot of times we're trying to roll up on them, you know, in a john boat or you know, a canoe or something like that, and you got a lot bigger presence. This little sneak boat, one man. I mean, it's gonna be stealthy. Like, we're gonna be able to get some gators like this. And so we put it in the water, and I got the inaugural ride. And so I got out there, we spotted the alligator. I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. And because let's face it, I mean, the exciting part of catching an alligator is the fight, right? I mean, because so I should have explained this better, but the bow fishing tackle for the arrow. So once you shoot that alligator, it's not designed to kill the alligator. There's depending on how familiar you are with bow fishing, you know, is going to, how much you know about this already, but there's a toggle on the arrowhead, and so the idea is that toggle goes just under the hide and then sets up against the hide, and so you just got a line to the alligator, or whatever you're bow fishing. It's not intended to kill them. And so, like I say, once we would shoot the alligator with the line, the arrow, you know, it takes off, and it's we got to try to pull it back in, and depending on how big it is, depends on how much of a fight, and we try not to stress that the fishing arrow, because it's a smaller line, too much, because we don't want to pull it out, because it's going to be that much harder to catch. And so we would use that to get up and get another line. And so I got out and I was all psyched up and prepared, kind of going solo in this little boat on this good alligator. Alligator was definitely bigger than a boat. And get out there and he's crossing right in front of me. And I'm, all foot pedals. I got the crossbow. We got a laser so you can see where your point of aim is. I mean, it was kind of like, we looked like we knew what we were doing. And that alligator's crossing right in front of me, and I put the laser. And generally, we would try to aim kind of around that front shoulder because the back has the hard bony scutes. They're, scales, or it's bone. And so, if you don't hit that just right, the arrow can just deflect off. But you also, for the hide market, the garment market, you're using the belly portion of the alligator, and so you skin it up the back and you skin the tops of the legs. So if you hit it in the shoulder somewhere just right, you can actually use your skin it and cut that hole out so you don't actually have a hole in the hide. And so that's what we would try to do. And so this alligator's crossing right in front of me, and I get my laser on him, and it kind of rolls. I see that I had a good hit, and it kind of rolls and then just disappears. And usually, if you hit them good, there's a big commotion. The line goes out like it. And so, if you miss them, a lot of times there's a big commotion, but they just go underwater and they're gone. But your line never goes out. I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck, my line didn't go out, but I know I hit him. I know I got a good hit. You could kind of tell because you were so close. If you saw that arrow kind of kick, generally that was a hit versus if if it just kept going straight, a lot of times it was a miss. And so I was confused, and so I went to pulling line, and I started pulling line. I was like, man, there's something heavy. And I had hit the alligator right in the neck and killed it stone cold dead. Like, I could have never done that shot again if I wanted to, but the one time that I didn't want to, I was so excited. And probably for the best, right? Counting my track record and all, but the one time I didn't want to, naturally, that was when it happened. So I did have I was guiding the alligator hunter one time, and he happened to shoot an alligator. It's tough, as I guided hunts for a little while, and it's tough sometimes for people to do that, because especially if you're hunting public water alligators, it's they can be pretty skittish, and they don't sit around like you see on the nature shows with their whole body up out of the water just hanging out. Like a lot of times it's just their head. And so to get somebody to realize and not focus on the head when they're aiming, but try to focus underwater where their body is, but where you can't see, it's tough. And he did the same thing. We rolled up, on this alligator, we got real close, and he shot, and you could tell it hit, but it was the same thing, just kind of and we pulled it up, and he hit that thing right in the ear. The prongs on the arrowhead didn't even expand. It just went in. I mean, fortunate that it was in so hard it didn't pull out as we were pulling him up, because it probably wasn't an inch of penetration, but it was right in the skull, just boom, graveyarded him. So that, I got a picture of that on my phone. I'll have to dig that up. Maybe I can throw it up on here, but it's pretty exciting, pretty interesting. So we had another incident with an alligator. There was one pond, a big pond. It's not, I wouldn't consider it lake size, but it was a big enough pond that people would wakeboard and ski and stuff in there in the county. And they called and complained of a pretty big alligator hanging out in there. And so we went over, and for whatever reason, we never did put the boat in there. But we had just rigged up, or either had the idea, he had the idea of rigging up a cage trap for an alligator. And so we did that there. We put together it's probably an 8-foot long cage trap made out of the horse panel, so the 2x4 horse panel. And the door, it was just a gravity door that swung down like that, and we were able to situate it kind of right in the shallow water. The water was deep enough where the alligator kind of swim in, but when he took the bait, it drop the door, Super simple design. We actually caught, I think we caught like a 7-foot alligator, 7-foot female in there. And folks were like, no, there's a bigger alligator in here. And so we caught that alligator, got it out, and reset it. And a couple days later, we didn't have any activity for a couple days. And then one day we went back and checked, and it was destroyed, demolished. That big gator had got in there, and he wasn't having it. And he got out. It's the power of those animals, just animals in general. You see a foothold that gets busted up by a coyote. It's pretty impressive, pretty incredible. So that was a pretty neat instance of coming up with making a trap and then using it, being successful with it. We didn't do a whole lot of kind of the Louisiana style of, we used a few baits. A lot of times we would use lungs, like beef lungs, and because it would float, but you had to use it. You had to know an alligator was right there, or else the turtles would just clean it up. And then occasionally we used a hanging hook. But again, you had to get it high enough out of the water that the turtles wouldn't mess with it. But for the most part, we were trying to get them that night if we could while we were there. So the one time, I guess maybe the most memorable was the time that I got bit by an alligator, which when I tell people that, it's always I think there's more of an expectation than what really happened. So I did get bit, and I can't even hardly find them anymore. I used to have just a few scars right on my arm. Actually, yeah, they're on my right arm. There they are right there. Where I got bit. And it was only, what people also don't realize is it was like a 6-foot alligator, which a 6-foot alligator sounds big. That's as big as me, but a 6-foot alligator, when you look at it, especially, if you put it next to someone, it's relatively small. It's long, but it's real skinny. They don't have a lot of weight to them. Their head's not super huge. So, excuse me. A 6-foot alligator is not that impressive size-wise. Now, I don't mean that to take, to diminish anybody's alligator that has harvested a 6-foot alligator, because alligator hunting is hard work. There's nothing wrong with a 6-foot alligator. I promise you that. But in people's general kind of concept, when you say a 6-foot alligator, people are picturing something as big as me, but in reality, it's not quite the same. But anyway, I was guiding a hunt with a hunter, and he shot the alligator, and he shot it with his bow, and we were getting it. He was getting it up to the boat. We're just in a John boat, and I had my beaver snare, because that's what we would always do, was snare and we get a line on them. Well, I wasn't necessarily thinking, and for whatever reason, I didn't tie a line to the snare itself. And so he gets the gator up, and the gator pops right there up beside the boat. And so I just take the snare and slide it over his neck and pop it to make sure it's tight. Well, when I popped it, he went to rolling. And I'm holding the end of the snare, and what does he do? He just rolls right up that snare with his mouth wide open, and the first time he feels something in it, he shuts it. And so he rolls right up the snare over into the boat, and as he's flailing, there's my arm, and he grabs it and continues to roll. And when he did that, I knew he had me. And so the only thing I could do was stop him from continuing to spin. And so I went into the bottom of the boat right on top of him and just pinned him down. The biggest thing that saved me was I had a long sleeve shirt on. And what he did more than anything is he grabbed that shirt. And so, like I said, I've got just a few really thin scars. It's not even impressive enough to show people. But he kind of scraped me. But like I said, he mainly grabbed my shirt, and so I rode him back to the bank. We got out and kind of got clear and got square. But that's when inevitably people are going to ask you if you've ever been bit if you're messing with alligators. well, I'm not necessarily proud of it, and especially don't have that spectacular of a story or scars to show. But I guess it is kind of a story anyway. And that's the bad thing about it, man. And the thing that I wish is I know, man, we caught so many gators that summer. It was just it was a high year, and I mean not a lot of it really stands out in my mind. You know, there's one in particular that I remember was on a golf course, and we used a bait. It was in a pond, and we had a lung, and we saw the alligator, and so we threw the bait out and backed off like 30 yards, and we could see the alligator sitting there eating it. That was pretty neat just to see him watch him eat the bait, you know. But like I said, I kind of hate it because I wish that I would have been keeping a journal or keeping notes of some of this stuff at the time, because I know there's a lot more stories there. The next kind of section, so after I got married, my wife and I moved to North Florida, and we had been there probably a year and a half, and I noticed a little blurb in the paper about looking for a county trapper for the county that we lived in. I was like, you gotta be kidding. They just put this in the paper? Like, this is awesome. And so I sent them a message, sent my resume and all, and they actually came to the county, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. A couple of those folks from the Nuisance department came and interviewed, and I got selected. So I was the county trapper. I was like, man, this is awesome. Well, one of the things that you find out is, if you're in a more rural area, in a backwoods area, which North Florida is, except for like Gainesville and Jacksonville, folks don't call. Folks handle their problems themselves. So there wasn't a whole lot of gator catching going on, but I got a few calls here and there. Kind of enough to keep it interesting. That's one part of it too. It's kind of like with the nuisance trapping stuff. Is at one point, especially probably when you're younger and got a lot more zeal, and you think that the those everyday calls and those midnight calls and all are, that's going to be the most exciting part. But you realize that you get to kind of dread those calls sometimes, and so it's not necessarily a bad thing. But like I said, the biggest key there was, there wasn't enough. I wasn't catching enough alligators to really warrant having much of a market to sell or anything like that. In fact, I wound up right before I left, I dropped all my hides off to be tanned at a tannery, and I've got a bunch of them still. That's part of my desire to get into this leather stuff, because I got a bunch of prime alligator leather that needs to be done something with, and because my squirrel brain always comes up with new ideas, I haven't got around to finishing that stuff yet. So but so my wife, I got chosen to be the nuisance trapper for our county, and so that led to a couple of interesting. I'll tell you the most memorable and last, but one of the more memorable is I got a call. It was like 11:30. I mean, we were in bed, and it was an alligator in the Holiday Inn parking lot, the hotel uptown, and so, all right. So I usually kept all my stuff in the truck, so I just jumped right in the truck and rode right up there, and it was kind of in the flower beds. Of course, there was cops, and, there wasn't nothing else going on in a little old town that late at night, so there was a bunch of cops up there, and so I parked kind of over off to the side, and I knew I wasn't going to need I wasn't going to need much, man. I just need to get a snare on it. And so I stuck some electrical tape in my pocket, and I grabbed a snare and a rope. I always kept one of those ready with a float, and then the only kind of long stick I had was a net, just a little old like dip net, but it had like a 5 foot handle on it. And so I grabbed that net and that the float and the snare, and I go to walking up there, and I get kind of under the awning, and one of those cops look at me and said, "I think you'll need a bigger net." And so I said, yeah, maybe so. Everybody's got to be a smart aleck. But so I walked up there, and kind of sized the situation up. It was like a 7.5 foot alligator. It was a pretty good sized alligator. And the biggest thing was I knew I had to get it away because, as soon as you pop that snare on them, they go to that rolling and, they're going to beat themselves or whatever's around them up. And so, he was right up against the wall, and I knew he went to rolling. He was going to be flouncing and bashing his head and his body on that wall. And so, I knew as soon as I popped the tide, I had to be pulling too. And so that's what I did. I taped my snare on the end of the net and used that to get it around his head. And then, I wasn't there 15 minutes, all in, all done, but it was just it was kind of comical, especially with the cops' reaction when I walk up there with the little dip net. So, get no respect. I know how Rodney Dangerfield felt, The most memorable by far was a night, and my wife and I were just talking about it because she would go and help me. She liked the stuff. It's exciting, The most memorable night was, we were talking because I was trying to remember. So throughout the course of the evening, we caught 3 alligators. So I can't remember if it was I was trying to remember where we caught all the alligators at. One of the alligators, I know it was in a little beach community. I say beach very loosely, but there was one of the kind of the culverts coming out near the condos and all. There was a small alligator hanging out there, and so I had my boat because we were going. I'd also gotten a call about an alligator that was hanging out near one of the small little islands that was on the coast that a lot of people would park at and hang out on the weekends. They'd park, there'd be a big congregation of folks park. It's supposed to be a pretty big alligator hanging out around there. And so my plan was, after we hit the spots around town, I'm going to put in and go try to catch that alligator. And so we hit that first spot. I had a boat behind the truck, and I had my wife and another guy that was helping me and spot the alligator. So I pulled up right across the culvert and got out, and the alligator wasn't far, and so I just had a little throwing treble hook and line, and so he wasn't far, and he didn't spook, and so I just took that hook and I tossed it over him, and pulled it in till it was right at him, and I set it. Well, of course, when I set it, he darts off, and I wasn't really planning or thinking. I guess I didn't have but like 20 foot of rope, and he snatched the rope right out of my hands, and so the rope goes off in the water, and I see it. I guess he had stopped or something. I don't know. And I see it just sitting there, and I wasn't thinking. I was just reacting and acting. I don't know. I wouldn't have changed anything. But he snatched the rope out of my hands, and the rope's laying there in the water. So I jumped in and grabbed it. And my wife freaked out. She didn't know what I was thinking, but I jumped in, grabbed it, and held it firm, and then started climbing back out and pulled the alligator in, caught it no problem. But she was so mad at me for jumping in the water. Alligator that we had just stuck with a hook and was mad and just swam off. We didn't know where he was, and here I go piling off into the water after him. That's by far her most memorable event. But this whole evening culminated in both of us' memorable events. So, like I said, I can't remember. I think there was another alligator that was in another one of the beach communities, and then we put the boat in from there. And so we caught, I think that alligator was hanging around the canals there too. We caught that one. Somehow we wound up with 3 alligators. We couldn't leave them in the truck, so I put them in the bottom of the boat. And, we were going to go out, try to catch another alligator, and then come back in. And, bing, bang, boom, no problem, right? And so it was me, my wife, and my buddy helping me. And I should have looked it up. I can't remember how far it was. I'm going to have to look that up and see. But we motored out. Now, my boat of choice at the time, one of the best boats, I can't complain about it one bit other than it was slower than Christmas. I had a 1648 tracker, all welded John boat, and a 27 horsepower Go Devil motor. And that long tail Go Devil, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. That thing was, I rarely had ever problems I didn't have any problems out of the motor at all. but it was slow. Now, especially if you put a load in that boat, you ain't going anywhere fast. Come on. So we put the boat in. Like I said, we caught the one alligator there in the canal, and then we kept on going out to the islands. Yeah, of course, my computer's. And so we get it. It was dark by now when we were going out there. And let's see. I want to say it's like 5 miles, but I'm gonna double check that to make sure. But anyway, so we get out there, and so where that island is kind of right behind it is the mouth of a creek, and so we got there, shining, and I see an eye right in the mouth of the creek, and so we're trying to make a play at getting on this alligator, and all of a sudden, of course, my battery's dead. And so we, out there, not a soul around because it's night, It's like, I don't know, it's probably 10 o'clock by now because it was summertime, so it was late by the time it got dark. And, we had been shining a little bit, and undoubtedly that's what I'd shine a pile out of that boat, but, I had my light hooked up to the battery. And so, undoubtedly, that's what happened. Is we'd stopped for a little while and I was shining, and then that was all she wrote for the battery. And so, it's like, oh, that's amazing. And nobody to call. So there wasn't but one thing to do. I had a collapsible paddle. But the only thing to do is start walking. It's flat, and so I knew it wasn't very deep, but what else are you gonna do? So, ploosh, out of the boat I go, and I start dragging that boat. And the water goes anywhere from it probably never got below my waist, but waist deep to at times chest deep. And it's the middle of the night. We were just after an alligator in the mouth of this. Here we go. Let's see if I can get a. Anyway, we were just after an alligator in the mouth of this creek, and here I am, dragging the boat now, and sharks and alligators and whatnot else, and you talk about a long night, just dragging that boat. Keep in mind, I got my wife sitting in the seat in the boat with 3 alligators flopping around underneath her. And she's dozing off and whatever. And so finally, right about daylight, I get to where we can see there was a kind of a makeshift ramp, or just a smaller ramp. I parked everything uptown and at the beach, and there was kind of a ramp midway, and it was at least 3 miles. And so that was, we made it there. It was breaking daylight when we finally made it there. And I was able to finally get a hold of a buddy to come and pick us up. And yeah, I probably told that story as least anticlimactically as possible, but that was yet again my calamitousness experiences. That was definitely one that I can assure you my wife will never forget. For me jumping in the water to having to get in the water and drag the boat. You talk about an exhausted fella, exhausted, ridiculous fella. That was me. Especially that we went all the way down there and didn't even get the alligator. Now, the icing on the cake was, the good icing, I guess you could say, was that I was able to go back, and it was probably a couple weeks. I didn't go back right away, but it was probably a couple weeks later. And with another friend of mine, he went out there helping me, and we spotted an alligator. And we were, it was kind of, it wasn't even right up against the bank. It was kind of out on the flats a little bit, which is surprising, because usually, you see them there a lot of times. They're right up close to the bank, and of course you hear people say alligators don't live in salt water. This sucker was in salt water, and so we'd spot him for a little bit, and then all of a sudden we kind of lose him. He'd go down or whatever. And so finally we saw him, we got a line on him, and I got to paying attention. One thing that I found in Florida that was different than in Georgia was the water a lot of times was so clear that you could see him underwater. And so we finally got to realizing that he was going down, and we were just drifting right over him. And so I had my buddy up front with the hand hook, and I was in the back. And so when we go down, he would throw and try to get him in. And I finally realized that, like, this ain't working, because you're throwing and then pulling, but we're drifting, and we're just passing over top of him. I said, let's watch him, and when he goes down, we got to be watching the water where he goes down. And right before we cross him, that's when we drop the hook and then snatch it. And that's what we did. And that worked like a charm. It was perfect. It was awesome being able to see him through the water, and we did just that. He went down, and I just killed the motor, and we just floated, and we could see him. All right, drop the hook, and we go right over him, and then pull the line tight and just set it, and game on then. And what it wound up being, the reason we kept losing them, crazy enough, it was two alligators that were both blind in one eye. And so we would see him when he was looking one way, and then all he had to do was turn the opposite way, and we couldn't see him anymore. But we'd see the other alligator over here. We thought we was after one alligator. It wound up being two alligators, both of them blind in one eye. And we did the same thing, caught both of them. That was a pretty awesome night, because they were both 9-foot alligators. They were both good alligators. But those were actually the last two alligators I caught when I was in Florida. And that was a good hunt. It's always satisfying to be successful, obviously, when you're hunting and trapping, and just the little bit of uniqueness about that, of being able to see them through the water and kind of snag them. That's the joy, the fun part to me about what we do as trappers and people that pursue animals, and is every situation is different, and learning and adapting to those different situations. So the last thing, I guess, what I'll leave you with is the kind of the thing that I really hated, still hate, is that backwoods mentality. That I know a lot of folks have of not even necessarily kind of handling problems yourself, because that to each his own. If something's causing you issues, causing you worry, causing you problems, handling it yourself, that's one thing. But folks just kind of killing stuff for no reason. And the thing that stands out in my mind with that was, there was as I was a forester down there, and I had access to all kinds of land, and all kinds of places just way off the beaten path, and there was this one place in particular that had a couple of big sinkholes, and I just happened to this pine plantations, and then all of a sudden there's a 20-foot circle sinkhole right there, and I was messing around back there just riding, checking things out, because there was an old camp back there, and I saw something moving in that sinkhole, and went over there, and it was a big alligator, like 12-footer, big alligator, and he was way back there. But I knew with that camp there, it wasn't going to be good for him, because there was nowhere for him to hide. That was a small hole. It was deep, I'm sure, but it was a small hole, and there was not water anywhere. He wasn't coming or going. He was staying there full time. I don't know if he was catching hogs or deer that were coming down there or what, but I'd go down there every once in a while. Probably once a month, I'd ease back there and kind of check on him. And one day I rode back there and he was belly up. I knew he was going to with that camp there. I knew somebody was going to kill him, but man, I hated that because he was just. That's what people don't realize about us as trappers and hunters and conservationists. The tie, I guess, the bond that we feel with those animals. That, you know, absolutely. Did I kill alligator? Would I have loved to have caught that alligator and skinned him? Absolutely. But you know what? I really enjoyed pulling back there, knowing that he was back there and watching him. Because I mean, it's not that often that you can get up that close with a 12-foot alligator and just kind of see what he does and just see him for what he is and not have a big crowd or hoopla. And I just hate that mentality that some folks have of just killing to be killing. I'm preaching to the choir, I know, but just kind of a thought on it. So anyway, I hope that my rambling and my stories, I hope it's I strung something together that you could kind of get something out of, at least get some entertainment and enjoyment out of. If nothing else, maybe you can relate to me if you have the same instance of issues with calamities happening to you whenever you're doing your thing. So outside of that, one question I have for y'all, and I would love to hear your input. If you would email me, Chris@CoyoteTrappingSchool.com. Something I've been noodling on is how valuable would you see a lightweight trap being? Right now I'm just thinking of any trap, whether it is a foothold trap, whether it's a conibear trap. It's tough. From my perspective, it's kind of tough, especially for a southern folks to wrap their head much around that, because realistically, weight's not that big of a concern. I don't carry things far. I don't care. I mean, everything stays, from, excuse me, I'm going, from the truck 30 feet maybe at most. And so I'm not going very far with things. And so I struggle with knowing how important that could be to some people. Weight and what the significance of shaving some weight could be. So if that's something that you could see as a benefit, could see as a plus, send me an email with what your thoughts are. What specifically would that be? Would it be a coyote trap? Would it be a beaver trap? Are you carrying a lot of your traps in for specific reasons? There are a lot of folks in your area that do the same, and that you could see that as being a benefit or whatever. So shoot me an email, let me know, and I appreciate y'all listening. We'll catch you next time.